again with another episode of Fight Night Picks Selects, the brand new show here on Fight Night Picks. As always, one half of your co-hosting duo at Craig Allen FNP. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram. Matt, you can find him at Matt Allen FNP. By the way, that's his name, but without the FNP. And today, Matt, we are talking about the sweet science. We're talking about the best pure boxers that are currently in the sport of mixed martial arts. And Matt, not necessarily the best boxers can be found in the UFC, but I think that the six that we're going to go with, your three and my three, we're going to go with UFC fighters. And I know your list, like people might not agree with my list. They might think it could be a little controversial. You picked the top three. So I'm going to differ from your three. They're the three that I would have come up with.
Yeah.
But I'm going to let you start on this one because boxing is one of those things. And I mentioned it in the live chat at one point, and this is a weird little tangent with Jason Perillo, because he's probably, if you had to pick a boxing coach for an MMA fighter, I would pick Jason Perillo. He would be my guy. I know some MMA fighters every now and again get the opportunity to train with Freddie Roach. He'd be another one of those guys. But unless you're George St. Pierre or Aaron Pico, it's pretty hard to get connected with Freddie Roach. But if you can get Jason Perillo and Ruka Sport on your side, we've seen multiple champions likes of Rafael Dos Anjos, Michael Bisping, and Chris Cyborg train with him. So I think that's pretty good company, especially when you have the Grand Slam champion training there. But Matt, in terms of pure boxing, there's some techniques that we would see in boxing that we don't see as much in MMA. I'm talking like double jabs, a little bit, some of the feints, some of the movements, and even the stances we won't see from boxing into MMA just because of the intricacies of the fact that, hey, I may get taken down. Or if I throw a double jab, I could get hit with a punch to the body. I could get hit with a kick. Exactly. So in terms of pure boxers and fighters that have been able to translate that just discipline into mixed martial arts, who's maybe not your number one, but who's your first pick in a best pure boxer in MMA?
So the best one, I think, I'll just start at heavyweight and then I'll kind of work my way down the weight classes. Stipe Miocic is going to be my first pick. I mean, he's a heavyweight champion who really only does two things, and that's wrestle and box. And his wrestling's really good, but we talk about this all the time. There's three different kinds of wrestlers. You have pressure wrestlers, guys who are just going to go take you down, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. Guys like GSP who are going to try to take you down, beat you up on the ground, maybe look for submission, just, over and over and over again. Then you have different wrestlers. You have guys who are back takers like Kevin Lee. They're going to take you down, try to get you back and choke you out. Then you have wrestlers like Chuck Liddell, Stipe Miocic, and Justin Gaethje. And their type of wrestling is to not let you take them down, and then they're going to knock you out on the feet, which is a very fan-friendly style. And Stipe, when you watch his fights, his pure boxing is absurd. You don't see guys, especially at the heavyweight classes. Heavyweights mainly just throw power shots because they know it only takes one shot to knock somebody out. Stipe is way smarter with it, though. He figured out if I just go for more, not really pot shots, but if I set up my big power shots over and over and over again, I'm not going to get as tired as my opponent. And I'm going to be able to kind of soften them up with my soft punches and then land the big ones. We see the Diaz brothers do it quite a bit where they're going to throw, 5-6 punches at like 50%, kind of get a read on their opponent, and then they're going to start going hard with the big shots afterwards once they see the openings. Stipe does that exact same thing. Yes, granted, he's a little bit slower with it. He is a heavyweight. But go back to just the DC fight, go back to the Junior Dos Santos fight, really any of Stipe's fights. He wins them on really, really good boxing fundamentals. Stipe Miocic, to me, is like the Tim Duncan of MMA. You might not get like the most flashy things you've ever seen, like LeBron James style, but you're going to get fundamentals that are so much better than everyone else's. Sometimes it's nice to just watch excellence. And when you watch Stipe Miocic's fight, that's really what you're watching. You're just watching a guy who does everything at such a high level and boxing really more than any other skill. So I think Stipe has to be at the top of my list.
Yeah, Stipe for sure. I mean, again, that would have been one of the picks that I would have gone with. Now, I'm going to go with one that might even be somewhat controversial just based on previous track record of his last three fights. I'm going to go with Cody Garbrandt. And Cody Garbrandt's one of those guys, you had mentioned it in your opening, and I'm going to kind of expand on it a little bit. The wrestle boxer is probably one of the best types that you can be in MMA right now. If you have at least competent takedown defense, so you're able to fight against offensive wrestlers and just overall grapplers, you're going to be able to set things up with your hands. And I think with Cody Garbrandt, he was one of those guys, and especially with the guys that he fought on his way up. I mean, he comes into the UFC, he's 5-0. He fights Marcus Brimage, knocks him out. Fights Henry Briones, wins by decision. Fights Augusto Mendez. Again, that was probably that challenge where both of the guys were undefeated. Augusto Mendez, of course, is one of those guys that in the Phoenix area, one of the better jiu-jitsu coaches out there. Oh, by the way, Cody Garbrandt knocks him out in the first round. Then he fights Thomas Almeida, who at the time was undefeated. And he went from Augusto Mendez, who was 5-0, to Thomas Almeida that was 21-0 and knocks him out in the first round. Then he fights Takeya Mitsugaki, knocks him out in the first round. Then he fights Dominic Cruz, and this is where kind of the Cody Garbrandt legend came to be. Because, yeah, you beat Takeo Mitsugaki. All right, that's a pretty good win. Now you're going to face the best bantamweight of all time. And we saw in that fight, Cody Garbrandt's combinations and hand speed mixed in with his footwork was really what made the difference. And that's the thing in MMA with the striking. Yeah, you see a lot of fighters that might be a little labored, or they might throw those looping power shots. We talk about it all the time. Your Justin Gaethjes that are all hell and fury, where they go in all like there's only one speed and it's go. And then there's other fighters that will pick you apart, like the Diaz brothers, that'll go, see what they can land. Or you have the Cody Garbrandts that it's perfect, flawless combinations, in and out, in and out. And we see that with Cody Garbrandt now in his last 3 fights. Yeah, he's been knocked out, and it hasn't gone all that well for him. In the first Dillashaw fight, I mean, he did rock him, but still, for Cody Garbrandt, if he's able to work on his striking defense even a little bit, I know he's got some health issues currently right now, and he was booked to face Rafael Assunção, which I think would have been a perfect fight. But for me, and pure boxing alone, Cody Garbrandt has to be one of those guys, especially with even that wrestling background that he has. Really helped him out so far early on in his career to the point where he was 11-0 facing really top-tier competition.
Well, Cody Garbrandt's a great pick, too. I believe he's an undefeated amateur boxer, too, so, perfect background to get into MMA with. Cody Garbrandt was a guy who I considered having on my list. I did take him off for my last guy. I'm going to go with our BMF champ since I'm going down in weight classes. Jorge Masvidal's got to be on the list, and people are probably kind of tired of him being in the headlines at this point. I feel like there has been a little bit of Masvidal fatigue, if you will. I'm still a fan, I'm not going to lie. But his pure boxing is absurd. We just talked about how good Nate Diaz is, and Jorge Masvidal basically just had a kickboxing fight with him and beat the brakes off him. There wasn't that much positive from Diaz in that, and you can say what you want. Oh, we could have stopped him later on. Let's be honest, that fight was not going well for Nate Diaz, and 90% of it was due to not only the crisp boxing of Masvidal, but the power behind his shots too. And Nate, we've seen him get dropped. McGregor's dropped him. Roy McDonald throw him around on his head. We've seen him get hurt, but I don't know if we've ever seen Nate Diaz just completely get outstripped from the second a fight starts until it ends. I mean, he had moments against McGregor. He had moments against a lot of guys. He may have had 2, maybe 3 moments against Masvidal, but even those were very, they weren't that important, and they didn't really make that big of an outcome on the fight. Masvidal had his way with that. And if we go back to, Darren Till, people want to talk about how good his Muay Thai is. He's this phenomenal striker. He's knocking a bunch of people out. He's as big as a welterweight can get. And Masvidal, again, he throws body kicks, inside leg kicks, and punches. And that's really a lot of his arsenal. So pure boxing. And it's kind of crazy, too. When I think of backyard fighters, I don't normally think of technique that comes along with them. Kimbo Slice is a perfect example, but Jorge Masvidal is the complete opposite. He has perfect technique, but somehow came from a street fighting background. So a very odd career trajectory of his, but you can't talk about boxing and MMA without talking about Jorge Masvidal.
Yeah, Jorge Masvidal, the guy who headlined Bellator 1 and who also fought Kimbo Slice's protege Ray in that backyard fight and beat him up quite badly. Now, Matt, again, I want to say this, in some of these lists, you had free pick on the first 3. So I'm just getting maybe not slim pickings, but Garbrandt 1. My number 2, I know we both agree with this guy. This is a guy that's challenged for a title, albeit interim, at 185 pounds. And this is a guy that had a lot of success at 170 pounds before he was forced to move up, more or less. But Kelvin Gastelum is one of those guys that they talk about it a lot in boxing, but you typically see it with Mexican boxers where it's head down and you're always constantly moving forward. And you see that with Kelvin Gastelum when he boxes in an MMA fight. The thing with Kelvin Gastelum too, perfect gym to be going at. We just brought up a guy in Rafael dos Anjos that's able to train with Jason Perillo over at Ruka. But at King's MMA, where you also see Rafael dos Anjos, you have Kelvin Gastelum. And it's a great team there that's built up over all sorts of different disciplines. In one breath, you might have a guy who's all of a sudden a Muay Thai champion in Khalil Roundtree, or you might end up with a great pure boxer in Kelvin Gastelum. So for Gastelum, it's just the fact that he's always moving in forward. And something that you don't see a lot of fighters do well, there's one of 2 things. Either you're poor at distance management, or you're one of those fighters who is just in there hard-nosed and you absolutely understand how to get it done. Kelvin Gastelum is the type of guy that can fight from distance, but he's very, very good in close. That left hand is absolutely deadly. And Kelvin Gastelum, for me, is one of those guys. And you look at the run, he loses split decision to Tyron Woodley back in 2015. He loses split decision to Neil Magny. He loses by arm triangle. That was a weird one against Chris Weidman, Long Island. I'm not going to lie. He loses to Israel Adesanya in a split decision to Darren Till. These are some of the top fighters. Chris Weidman. But these are some of the top fighters in the weight class at the time, whether it's 170 or 185. There's no shame in losses like that. And the wins are all that more impressive over guys like Rick Story, split decision, but Jake Ellenberger, Nate Marquardt, Johnny Hendricks, Tim Kennedy, Michael Bisping, and Jacare Souza, where, yeah, I thought Jacare won that fight, but still, it meant a lot. And Kelvin Gastelum's boxing got him to where he is today. Very good boxer, Kelvin Gastelum.
The hand speed of Kelvin Gastelum is just one of the most underrated qualities of any MMA fighter, just in the whole sport. Like, you think, okay, Damian Maia's jiu-jitsu, for instance, everyone knows it's good. Khabib's wrestling. But Kelvin Gastelum's hand speed really does deserve to kind of be in that pantheon, if you will, of like top skill MMA fighters.
And the thing too, I mean, I could have gone with a lot of different fighters. Like we were talking before the show, I said KJ Noons, but those are fighters from yesteryear. I want to go with current fighters. Yeah. And the other thing too, like my pick for number 2, actually, and I crossed it out, was TJ Dillashaw. But TJ Dillashaw, and again, the wrestle boxer, but TJ Dillashaw went from wrestling to Muay Thai to kickboxing. I mean, he's been kind of the head guy or the poster child for Bang Muay Thai for a long time. And again, a lot of people are down on Cody Garbrandt. A lot of people are down on TJ Dillashaw, but still the skill's there. I'm just going with pure boxing technique. Who's your third fighter that you went with?
Well, just last thing on TJ, if you don't mind, that's how good of take, EPO out of it. I know that's hard to do because he admitted to actually taking it. It's not really one of those black and white ones, but that's how good of a striker TJ Dillashaw is. That we can talk about him having some of the best pro boxing in all of MMA, but he gets head kick knockouts a lot. Like, that just shows you how good some of these guys are. So for my third pick, it wouldn't be a Fight Night Picks video without me mentioning Dustin Poirier, the best boxing in all of MMA, if you really ask me. The fight against Max Holloway really had two of the best boxers in all of MMA fighting against each other in primarily what was a boxing fight. I know Poirier went for a few takedowns, especially later on in the fight, but that fight, 90% of it took place on the feet. And it was kind of interesting. This is why I thought Masvidal would beat Nate Diaz. Who does Dustin Poirier train with every single day? Jorge Masvidal. Who does Nate Diaz fight just like? Max Holloway. So Masvidal basically had a good friend and training partner of his have the same fight that he was about to have later on that year. And that's why those two guys work together so well. And it's not a surprise that they come from the same gym too. Mike Brown's not a Jason Perillo, and he's not a Renzo Gracie, for instance, where, okay, here I have my jiu-jitsu coach, I have my boxing coach, and I have all these coaches. Mike Brown's very much like a Faraz Sahabi, where he's still young enough and in really good shape that he can do everything, and he's really good at showing his students, but he's just sort of that perfect kind of overall head coach. He's great at wrestling, he's great at striking, really good jiu-jitsu. He can just kind of do everything, and the Poirier that we saw fight, for instance, Michael Johnson, compared to the Poirier right now, is one of those night and day, completely different fighters we've ever seen. I mean, and he really only uses that one skill. He's primarily a boxer. He has good takedown defense. He has good jiu-jitsu, of course. When you watch Dustin Poirier fight, go back to the Gaethje fight, go back to the Alvarez fight, the Pettis fight, the Holloway fight. He's outboxing all those guys. And the really key point was all those names that I just mentioned, other than Pettis, are still top tier fighters. And for you to be able to go out there and finish all of them primarily with your hands, that's going to put you on a list like this. So I think Poirier has to be on a top 3 list of best boxers in the UFC.
And we've mentioned it over and over and over again. The benchmark for the MMA boxer, one of them for sure, is Nate Diaz. Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Nate Diaz, but I'm not going to go with Nate Diaz for my number 3. And again, this list is purely subjective. Like, we're just picking 3 of the best pure boxers. You could absolutely torch us in the comments and say, hey, why wasn't Nick or Nate Diaz there? We mentioned them time and again. Like, they're at that upper echelon. I'm going to put somebody else on that list, and it's somebody that you had just mentioned, Max Holloway. And if you look at Max Holloway's stats in the UFC, the last time he won by submission, and listen, I'm going to compare him to Nate Diaz here. Max Holloway is one of those guys that if he's going to submit somebody, he's setting it up with the hands. That's how he was able to get it. But the last time he submitted somebody was Cub Swanson. And before that, his other submission win in the UFC is over Andre Fili. The rest of his wins in the UFC are by decision or by knockout, and there's plenty of wins split between them, really. And the telling sign with Max Holloway is if you look at his stats, strikes landed per minute for Holloway is at 6.66, the number of the beast, a 44% clip. His strikes absorbed per minute, 4.45, and his striking defense is 62%, which isn't too bad considering he's fought so much. And his thing is volume. His thing is volume, too. And we talked about it with Kelvin Gastelum, the fact that he can get into the pocket, which is something that you don't see all that well. Most guys or gals not great at that. Or maybe they struggle with distance management. Max Holloway is one of those guys that can excel at both, but it's his distance management that's quite good. And he doesn't land too many low kicks. You don't see him hot and heavy on the low kick as much as like a Justin Gaethje where it's just low kick, low kick,
Well,
low
no
kick.
one is.
I know, but Max Holloway, it's just the pure crisp boxing that he's so good at. Also, the other reason why I said about, setting things up with the hands, his takedown average is 0.24%. Now he's at an 83% takedown accuracy, 85% takedown defense, and his submission average is 0.4 per fight. You don't see those happen all that often. They're at super high percentages. Well, why is that? Because he set it up and absolutely tenderized his opponent with his hands to get the takedown and get the finish. And it's only happened twice. But if you do see Max Holloway on the ground, he has such a good ground game, but it's just set up from the hands. Now, Nate Diaz, his boxing is so good, but his jiu-jitsu is that much better. Like, his jiu-jitsu is so good. Like, he could just take you down and submit you, whereas you wouldn't see that as much from a guy like a Max Holloway, who I think just his boxing and the fact that it's so crisp, he's such a long guy for the division. Even though his reach isn't that long, he utilizes it so well, and he understands that distance management. But that's why I've got him as the third guy.
Yeah, good pick. I have one honorable mention. I think we have to. Amanda Nunes is going to be on this list. I know she throws kicks. We saw her head kick Holly Holm, but just based on pure boxing, and you can say maybe her level of competition on a boxing level, they're not really near her. I mean, Chris Cyborg was the only one, but look what she was able to do to Chris Cyborg. You called her, what, the Grand Slam champ? She knocked her out in under a minute. So I just think we have to mention Amanda Nunes, just to throw another name in there. But yeah, I agree completely with your three.
Yeah, I mean, you've got three, I've got three. I'd like to know in the comments what everybody's thinking about this. Yeah. Best pure boxers. I mean, there's plenty of them out there. And trying not to go with a Muay Thai influence, a kickboxing influence. Yeah, you'll see it from the fighters that we went with. But I know if you really, really look through and watch the tape, great boxing from these 7 fighters with Nunes. You want to throw the Diaz brothers in too. I totally agree with that. Let us know in the comments what you're thinking. Also, what we should go with for our next Fight Night Picks Selects, FNP Selects video. As always, you can find us on Twitter and Instagram at Craig Allen FNP, at Matt Allen FNP, the show at Fight Night Picks on Twitter and Instagram. And yeah, make sure you check out the rest of the content with the channel, our UFC 249 picks, if it happens, and the rest of the programming here. With Fight Night Picks, we always say, Matt, let's get into it.